All right, so we're back and ready for another deep dive. And this time we're going to be looking at the relationship between Jay-Z and Dame Dash. You sent over some really great analysis from Lord Jamar.
Yeah.
And his perspective on their partnership and the eventual split is, I think going to make for a really interesting conversation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Lord Jamar always brings a unique perspective. I think the way he combines, his perspective on the streets with his perspective on business really offers some interesting food for thought.
Yeah. So, okay, let's start unpacking this a little bit. So Jamar really emphasizes, Dame Dash's role in the early days.
Yes.
Like the Rockefeller days, right? Like it's almost like Dame was the driving force behind the scenes shaping Jay-Z's career.
Yeah. He uses the analogy of a hype man to describe Dame. And I think that's a really powerful image.
Oh, yeah.
When you think about it, like the hype man isn't the main act, but he's amplifying the energy. He's getting the crowd engaged. He's kind of like elevating the entire performance.
Yeah.
And that's really, how Jamar describes Dame's role in Jay-Z's career. It's like
that.
He was the hype man that, helped make him a superstar.
It really makes you wonder how many partnerships really have that dynamic going on, right?
Yeah, right.
There's one person out front and then you have this other person who is the brains behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that could be the case in music tech, even just starting your own business.
Absolutely, yeah. Any field. Having that kind of dynamic can be crucial to your success.
I think so too.
Yeah.
And Jamar even tells a story about, rolling up with his crew.
Yeah.
100 deep.
Yeah, 100 deep, yeah.
And it's just so clear that he put such a high value on loyalty.
Yeah.
Right? And it feels like that's a core element of how he's analyzing this whole Jay-Z and Dame relationship.
Absolutely. And what's so interesting is that this sense of loyalty seems to be at the heart of the conflict too.
Yeah.
Because when we look at the split, it raises the question, did Jay-Z betray that loyalty or was it a savvy business move?
And, this is where things get really interesting because Lord Jamar brings in this whole mafia perspective.
Right.
Yeah. And he almost suggests that sometimes survival in the business world requires a different type of loyalty.
Yeah. It's almost as if in that world, loyalty is about strategic alliances, right?
Yeah.
And self-preservation.
Right.
Even if it means making tough choices that could be seen as ruthless.
Yeah.
It's a different way of thinking about loyalty. It's not just based on emotion.
Yeah.
It's about what do you need to do to protect your interests and your future?
And this is a stark contrast, right? Because Jamar also talks about how, often in Black culture, it's much more heart-driven.
Absolutely.
That sense of community, looking out for each other. And so it's how do you reconcile those two forces?
Yeah, that's the dilemma. How do you reconcile, the heart and the hustle?
Yeah.
Especially when the stakes are high,
And then on top of that, there's this idea of Jay-Z maturing.
Right.
Right. And possibly distancing himself from some of Dame's behavior.
Right.
And Jamar kind of suggests that maybe Jay-Z perceived some of Dame's actions as, immature.
Right.
And wanted to, create some separation.
Yeah, it's a valid point. I mean, personal growth is essential, but it's how you manage those transitions.
Yeah.
Right? How you move on from those relationships. Because I think that reveals a lot about your character.
Yeah.
You can evolve without sacrificing empathy and respect for the people who are part of your journey.
Right.
It makes you think how much of this is just business practices evolving too. You know what I mean? Maybe what worked in those early Rockefeller days just wasn't sustainable as their empire grew,
Yeah. And Jamar makes a really good point about that. He's saying, there's a classy way to handle these transitions.
Absolutely.
Even when you're moving in different directions.
Yeah.
You can be strategic without, being disrespectful.
It all comes back to respect, right? Respect for the people who were there for you.
Yeah.
Even if the relationship needs to change.
Yeah, that's a good point. So what can we take away from this? Us listeners, we're not music moguls. So what can we glean from this?
Well, I mean, there are a few things I think that stand out. First is that emphasis on loyalty and camaraderie. Building strong relationships, whether it's in business or just life, is really a foundation for success. Having a solid support system, that's invaluable.
It makes you think, who are the people that you trust?
Yeah.
Who's got your back? It's a good reminder
Absolutely.
To appreciate those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. And those connections, they can evolve, just like the Jay-Z and Dame situation.
Right.
It's about learning to navigate those changes with grace.
Yeah.
And understanding.
This idea of balancing personal growth with empathy really speaks to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can all strive to be more mature, more successful, but not at the expense of the people around us.
Exactly. And that ties into understanding that not everyone approaches things the same way, you know?
Yeah.
Some people are very heart-driven, some people are more strategic.
Yeah.
Recognizing those differences is key to navigating any kind of relationship.
Yeah, different strokes for different folks, right?
It's
Like you got to be
really-
like what your style is and how it interacts with others.
Exactly. And perhaps one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive is the importance of perspective and context.
Oh yeah.
You know, we often see these stories play out in the media.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to rush to judgment.
Oh, totally.
But as Jamar shows, there's always more to the story. You know, we can't just label people as good or bad based on headlines. It's a good reminder to pause, consider the different perspectives, you know,
Yeah.
the different motivations at play.
And it's easy to forget that,
Yeah,
these celebrities, these public figures, they're human beings.
totally.
They have their own complexities, their own histories.
Absolutely.
This has been a really fascinating discussion.
Yeah, it
So
is.
I want to throw it back to you, listener.
Yeah. Yeah.
What resonates with you the most? What are you taking away from this conversation?
Yeah, it's like we're looking at this specific situation,
Yeah.
you know, with Jay-Z and Dame, but the themes are so universal,
Totally.
right? Like loyalty, ambition,
Yeah.
evolving relationships. I mean,
Yeah.
we all deal with this stuff.
All the time, yeah.
Right.
And the fact that we're even having this conversation, I think it speaks volumes.
Absolutely.
It means that we're engaging with these ideas.
Yeah.
We're thinking critically. We're trying to, consider different viewpoints.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Trying to understand like the complexities of human relationships.
Yeah. And so it leads us to like the $1 million question.
Right.
Okay, if you were advising someone who was navigating a similar situation,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's a business partnership that's, on the rocks
Yeah.
or a friendship that's changing, what's the one piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah. And that's a tough one.
Yeah.
There's so many factors to consider.
Yeah.
But if I had to boil it down to one thing, it'd be this: remember your values.
Wow. So like, even when things are crazy,
Yeah.
emotions are high,
Yeah.
take a step back and just think about what's important to you.
Exactly. Yeah. In those moments when you're facing a tough decision,
Yeah.
ask yourself, what's truly important to me?
Yeah.
What kind of person do I want to be? How can I handle this in a way that aligns with my values?
So it's really about like staying true to yourself.
Yes.
Even when it's hard.
Even when it's hard. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to get swept up in the moment, right?
Oh, yeah.
But those values, they act as a compass, guiding you towards the best course of action.
And sometimes,
Yeah.
staying true to yourself means walking away,
Absolutely.
even if it's painful.
Sometimes that's the most courageous decision, right?
Yeah.
To choose a different path, even if it means leaving something behind.
I love that. So to kind of wrap things up,
Yeah.
we've really delved into this relationship between Jay-Z and Dame Dash, looking at loyalty, ambition, personal growth. And, Lord Jamar's insights, I think they've given us so much to consider.
Absolutely.
The importance of perspective, empathy, and just, staying true to those values.
And we leave you with this, listener.
Yes.
What are your values?
Ooh.
How are they guiding you on your journey? Something to think about as you navigate your own life and your own relationships.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.